Well, hello. Pastured poultry pens. Everyone has an opinion and a design. Having said that, let's talk about mine. At Crossroads Valley Farm, we use pastured poultry pens to manage our chickens while they're out in pasture getting fresh air and fresh grass. And behind me, I call them my salad and flat pens. And over behind them, I have one of the hoop houses that I've kind of migrated to. And they both have their advantages and disadvantages. And there's various design things that I've done over the last couple of years that I've improved and tweaked with. So let me go over and show you some of the things I've done and some of the improvements I would probably make or have already made, and some of the tricks that I've learned managing chickens with pastured pen. So behind me is your standard, I guess, Saladin based pastured pen. You know, it's about, in my case, about 8 by 10, holds about 40 birds, 2 feet high. It's the workhorse of the pastured poultry industry, and it works exceedingly well. It's a great place to start. I recommend it for anyone who wants to get into pastured poultry. It's a proven model, works great. Having said that, in my area, I found some challenges with it. So I've made some changes over to the hoop house, which I'll go into a second. But of course, I still use these pens because I have them. Now, in my case, I couldn't source aluminum top roofing. There's some heat issues. But other than that, they're great things. You know, I have the standard waterer, and I'll go over that in a second with some feeders. Love them. But like I said, I'm moving to a different model. But overall, I'm still using them, and they still produce chickens great. So as far as the details of this pen goes, like I mentioned before, it's about 2 feet high with metal roofing. Use a trolley in the back. I just use a simple trolley that used to move furniture with some slight modifications. But for watering up here, I couldn't get the standard bell water here in Canada. So I found that the nipple waters work actually really good where I am. I have it hooked up to, in this case, a PVC tube, which is 4 inches diameter. I found that the smaller 2-inch diameter PVC tube works better with the hose to the bucket, and I've had no problems with that. Other than this morning when it was a really cold morning up here and then the line froze. But it's starting to melt and the chickens are having no problem drinking again. I always reach in the morning and just make sure the nipple waters are working good. For the feeder, I've used this feeder right here, simply a 5-gallon bucket feeder with an oil pan on the bottom. This allows me to quickly, lift it up easily and put it in there. And this will support about 40 birds. It's a little tight for some of the space, but overall, if you give them enough feed, they all get fed just fine and everything works out just great. The main challenge that I've had with this type of pen is the summer heat. Unfortunately, up here we have high humidity and high heat. Can reach 35 to 40 above, plus humidity up in Nova Scotia. And I've lifted the back of these pens, even taken the back off the pens, but these, especially the Cornish cross breed, doesn't like the heat. So I've found some challenges with that. The second challenge I found is actually at the processing side, which is actually today, trying to get these guys out of this pen. Now you can have patience and go in there and use boards and collect them, but it's really a pain in the butt. So I've decided again to move more to the hoop house over there, which is more utilitarian and has other features and functionality that I can use in the future. But like I said before previously, if you're going to start on pasture poultry, this is a proven model. It works really good, and I recommend it to any beginner to at least get their feet wet and be successful. So here is my chicken pasture hoop house, I call it. There's many of these out on the internet, and I've used a similar design from Darby Simpson. Just look up the name, you'll find him. I made some small changes due to what I can find here in Canada. Instead of using cattle panels for the siding, I've had to use actual mesh for concrete mesh from a local steel plant here. And I just tied two of them together. It works about the same, a little heavier, but that's the only choice I had. And then I tarp over top of that, and of course mesh it. And it works quite well along with the back venting. What I love about this, again, is the open space. So it allows for the summer heat. I can open up the back, I can roll up the back tarp, and it just gives them more, more breathing room per se. Also love when I'm processing the chickens at the end, I can walk in and grab them. For a guy of my size, that's really, really good. As well as I've also found I can use this pen for other things, which is really, really good, especially on a small farm. I can use this pen for housing pigs when they're small, piglets. I can use it for sheep. I can use it for my hens in the wintertime as a run. I can use it just for simple storage. So compared to the salad and flat pens, which are only basically for one purpose, I can use this for multi-purposes again. So again, I've used for the water, I have the bucket hanging off the top down to the 2-inch nipple waters, and that works great, hanging from the top, as well as the same bucket. Now this is a little bigger, so I can have a few more chicks in here, but I typically only have about 40 to 45. The other thing I've done here is I've used this for the tarp. I've used a channel. It's kind of a PVC channeling that allows you to simply cinch down the tarp, because this tarp here, of course, over a year period wears away and you've got to replace it, and using lath and some kind of nailing becomes a mess. And this holds it down really good. We had some 100-kilometer-an-hour winds and this didn't rip off, right? So now, having said that, the one disadvantage of this pen is the winds. We actually had a massive windstorm last week, and the chicks in here had to be moved in a hurry because I wasn't home and our neighbors were looking after it, and I didn't tell them how to actually rebar it down to the ground well, and it started hopping. And they had to quickly move these chicks to a different location because this was like a big kite. Now, so you have to have a method of actually tying it down to the ground, which I do, but obviously it isn't perfected yet. So that is the disadvantage of this. The other disadvantage of this is in the cold times, it doesn't retain the heat. With these Saladin pens in my cold weather, the chicks can go underneath there and all their body heat, they can kind of stay warm. Where here it's definitely a little cooler. So maybe there's some ideas to hang from the ceiling and all that to keep warm in the spring. But otherwise, I do love this method. So quickly, a couple little tips I've learned, which are actually pretty valuable. I haven't heard anywhere else. One is when you first put the chicks out to pasture, they're not too smart, and they tend to not go in the right place. They don't want to go underneath because it's dark. They prefer to stay in the light, which can be bad, especially if the first night or night after that it rains, because once it gets dark and it starts to rain, the chicks don't know where to go. So you kind of have to teach them to go underneath. And I bought those little wee lights, those little red lights, little blinkers for your bikes. And you hang them underneath in the back, and they tend to like the red light, and they actually go back there and stay underneath for a while. Then once they kind of get used to that, after a couple nights, you can take the light out, and they're good to go. I found that instead of having to walk out here at night and dust time and kind of get in there and push them all back, which is really a pain until you learn, that's a quick way of doing it. The second tip is the length of this rope. The length of this rope here is very, 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 very important. You want to make sure the length of the rope is just long enough so when you move the pen and you just lean backwards, you actually end up moving the pen instead of you have to lift. So it's kind of like a lever action. The length of that rope is really easy on you. If you make it the right length, all you got to do is lean back and it moves the pen, let's say half a foot at a time versus having to lift. So it saves your back in that regard. The other thing I'm doing here is, like I said, these Saladin pens are really a pain for collecting the chickens at the very end when you're taking them to processing and putting them in crates. Otherwise, you have to climb in the pen and use boards to scoop them out, which can be a real pain. In my case, what I've done, I've put this electronet fencing, it's not electrified, that I use for my hens, temporarily around the Saladin pens. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to prop these pens out and shoo all these chickens out during the day here, and let them have the water and the feed outside here. And then basically lock them out of the pens, put the pens back down, and force them outside. And then once it gets to be dusk, we'll walk in here and collect the pens, maybe in a corner or whatever. Much easier than having to go in the pens. Now, that's not everyone has electronet fencing, but any kind of fencing will do. I just found that this method works much easier to collect the chickens instead of struggling and all that kind of stuff. Plus, it works good at dusk time because the chickens can't see and they're easier to collect. So, anyway, that's just a couple of little tricks, and I'm sure I have a few more up my sleeve, but works great. So overall, I love pastured pens. They let you be creative as far as how you design things, and please, take some what I've learned here. Take some other people have learned, make your own ideas, depending on where you live and the temperatures and stuff. There's lots of ways of skinning the cat, per se, or skinning the chicken. But overall, they work really well for pasture poultry. I find they maximize the overall amount of forage that the chickens get, because they get fresh forage every day, and they give them fresh air. But more importantly, they actually protect them from the elements and from predators. Now, because these are moved every day, I have every predator known to man out here. Bald eagles, hawks, foxes, everything. But I haven't been hit yet, knock on wood. And I find that the reason I haven't been hit for is because of my dog, obviously. But other reason is the pens are moved every day. And the predators don't seem to like the moving. They want to be able to scope it out. Now, maybe I might be wrong, but I've been lucky so far. So, overall, great thing to do. If you try it yourself, start small, probably go with the Saladin pen, and then play with it. Have some fun with it, and enjoy your chicken.